What are you thinking, Bob?
This is a president who is returning to Washington. Yes, he has concerns and grievances about the past. But in my conversations with him before the election and after the election and over the weekend, it's so evident to me that what's coming is fast action, that Washington is bracing for a disruptive presidency, but in a different manner than what we saw in 2017, where he was still trying to get a grip of how to run a White House, who to put around him. You see, the Republican Party now is totally in thrall to President Trump. They are with him. And you see this also out in the country, in the state legislatures. This is a moment of Republican power. And
then why does he keep going back to past history then?
Because that is who he is. He lingers on the past, but he has now put in place an administration that's going to ramp up in the coming hours all of this action on immigration, executive agency policy, and rolling back Biden-era regulations.
Well, you said fast action. The executive orders will be signed today.
And so we could even see some confirmations, as Senator Blunt said as well.
Just let everyone know, you are looking at now what is this luncheon, inaugural luncheon for the new president there. And you can see a number of the dignitaries. There is Barron Trump speaking with
Doug Burgum,
Governor Burgum, who is going to be the new Secretary of Energy. And
Interior.
Interior. Thank you very much. And there are a number of the Trump family members there speaking with Senator Rubio, who is going to be the new Secretary of State.
Yeah. Senator, they don't look like they're rushing to their plates. They're still standing around.
And there's Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas.
Speaking with Vivek Ramaswamy and Ivanka. And I did just spot Senator Tom Cotton, the Republican from Arkansas, the incoming Senate Intel chair, who was looking at his watch. I'm sure Senator Blunt just reminded us, too, that the Senate is supposed to get started with their business at 2 o'clock today, and the business of government, because there are a number of these agencies where the political appointees have left. They're gone, and the new people need to be signed into office. And
one thing to watch really quickly, Nora, is the Trump family and its finances. So many Democrats have been texting me and calling me in the last 24 hours, paying close attention to how President Trump and his family have put in motion certain business enterprises related to cryptocurrency and that whole financial investment space in recent days. But they don't have any control in the Senate or the House, so scrutiny will sometimes not be met with a subpoena, like it would happen if they had control of the House or the Senate. But you do hear this refrain now from Democrats that the Trump family's business interest is something they at least want to spotlight, even if they can't formally investigate it.
There's an interesting pairing. Justice Elena Kagan.
And McConnell, Senator McConnell, as Senator Blunt knows him too well and knows so well. This is someone the Trump team's a little bit worried about when it comes to the nominations. He's now an independent voice, and they're not really sure where he's going to land on Tulsi Gabbard, the Director for National Intelligence nominee, or when it comes to even Pete Hegseth, the nominee for the Pentagon.
Let me ask you about that, Senator Blunt, because in my conversations with people, too, oh, Senator Thune, you know, incredible now, Senate Majority Leader. And they said, yeah, but Mitch McConnell is still pretty much one of the most powerful people in the United States Senate. And he will be in charge of the Senate Defense Appropriations, which is a key post. Explain why that's important.
Well, he's powerful, but he's also untethered, which for 18 years, Mitch McConnell's had to worry about everything he said and how it might affect every other Republican. I think we're going to see him take a strong position on national defense, on our leadership in the world and the importance of that. And these intelligence and foreign policy confirmations will matter to him a lot.
He's already indicated that the Health and Human Services Secretary nominee matters to him a lot. He's put out a statement. He left RFK Jr.'s name out of it, but said anyone who wants this post better be very clear and distance themselves from anyone who is actively seeking to restrict or remove the polio vaccine from circulation, which is someone who works very closely with RFK Jr., there was well-documented evidence of a campaign to do so. And, of course, Mitch McConnell, having been a polio survivor himself.
Had polio, was just old enough to have polio before Dr. Salk found the way to cure polio. And still has some after effects of polio.
Another remarkable...
Clearly a pro-vaccine guy.
It seems if you go against Donald Trump, you do so at your own peril.
Well,
don't you?
McConnell has much peril.
You don't think he's worried about it? You don't think so?
He's no...
Nora, I think you just caught what I caught.
Yes, just remarkable to see Ashley Kavanaugh and Justice Kavanaugh having a conversation with Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan. And the reason that's noteworthy is because there will likely be a number of antitrust matters and more, including issues about social media that come before the Supreme Court. And this is what happens in the cozy corridors of power, or in this case, Statuary Hall of the United States Senate, where business leaders have the rare opportunity to have a conversation in a social way with the people that regulate them.
Well, Senator, you said earlier in the day that it's all about relationships. This is what we're seeing now, building relationships.
The Senate is particularly relationship driven because under the rules of the Senate, to get almost anything done, you have to have somebody from the other side work with you to get things done. And over time, that really builds up linkages that don't go away.
How much, Senator, do you think that Donald Trump will change, or how do you think he'll deal with the Senate? Would he do any actual outreach of the old kind that we used to talk about to the other party, or any of that stuff, or actually less of it because he's been reelected and he's got his own plans?
You know, Donald Trump's actually pretty approachable, and one of the interesting things I think about President Trump is he will respond to you almost exactly the way you approach him. I'm sure he had a great conversation with Senator Fetterman, who went to see him in Mar-a-Lago. Even that first long press conference he's already had, that was a relationship where it wasn't adversarial, but the press got a lot of information. So I think he'll maintain that. And also, I've been fortunate to be in the room with several presidents. Donald Trump was the only president I was ever with who would let you say whatever you wanted to say. Now, he would talk twice as much as everybody else in the room, but he was also never in a hurry. There was never a staffer one single time that said, Mr. President, you've got to go to the next event. Never rushed, wanted to listen, wanted to be absolutely sure you understood his position, but was following that conversation. He was engaged in a way that's pretty hard to find.
Nora, we're looking at Pete Hegseth, the pick to become the next Secretary of Defense, talking to Roger Wicker, the senator who chairs the committee that will, as we understand it, meet later today to discuss Hegseth's confirmation and see if they move that forward. Earlier, there was also a chat I spotted there between Lisa Murkowski and Senator Barrasso. Senator Murkowski is going to be one of those really interesting people to watch in terms of whether she votes with the majority of Republicans or takes some stance on some of these nominees that she's been clear. She said there was a clear message being sent by the Trump team that you better get in line, and if you don't, you will be primaried, meaning another Republican will try to take you out.
Are you curious to see what Susan Collins does as well?
Absolutely. The women in the Senate are going to be very interesting to watch.
It's interesting to watch the change of Joni Ernst, who seemed in the beginning to be quite skeptical of Pete Hegseth, but she's had a couple of meetings and now seems to have changed her opinion or tune about how she's going to vote on him. True?
Well, she had said she wanted to see the FBI vetting in relation to that allegation of sexual assault against him. But it does not, I think we never got a clear answer. Perhaps you know, Senator, whether any of that FBI briefing on Hegseth was shared beyond the ranking and chair of the Senate Armed Services. So I don't know if she got her questions answered, but in that hearing, she seemed to be on board with Pete Hegseth.
Well, I don't think it's clear either that the FBI report on Pete Hegseth included any information about that 2017. And it is important to remember, too, as Margaret and I have done some conversations about this as well, is that the FBI report is done at the behest of the client. And the client in this case actually happens to be the president-elect in that case. So it was compiled for the president-elect, not necessarily for the senator. So while we call it an investigation or a report, it's not traditionally that. It's not an exhaustive report of someone's entire background. And so we wouldn't expect that. But it goes through some sort of the basics on those things. I do want to bring in historian Douglas Brinkley. And Douglas, I know as you're watching this, I'm curious your thoughts about this moment in history.
Well, you know, I think Robert Costa rightfully pointed out in Trump's first inaugural, he didn't really own the Republican Party. Trump was seen as this populist outsider. All the old George W. Bush crowd really didn't even want to be seen with Trump much. And then his first inaugural, Trump had this massive resistance movement. We're not even talking about that women's march. It's the largest protest march in U.S. history in 2017 with women in pink demanding culpability for Trump's misogyny. And now, look at it right now. He owns the Republican Party. He's now defeated the two historic women nominees for president, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, and you're just having a kind of demoralization of women because, you know, Cecile Richards of Planned Parenthood died just hours before the inaugural today. She'd gone, and that was Kamala Harris's big issue, was women's reproductive health. The idea that the Republicans in the Supreme Court have worked to scrap Roe v. Wade. It's a very odd moment in U.S. women's history, how the demoralization that's come to them at the hands of Donald Trump, while at the same time some women and the conservative movement, a couple like Joni Ernst, they are rising, but that what we consider the movement of women is they're in a bad place right now.
I want to bring in Weijia Jiang, who is at the White House.